All right. Now you're on, Susie.
Okay. Okay. Uh, Will asked me to talk about social commentary in drama and some examples thereof. People who write plays are known as playwrights, and playwrights generally have something to say, which is why they go through the long, lonely, often heart wrenching process of writing a play in the first place. Many playwrights wish to comment upon society and culture in general, and maybe even influence it a little. They wish to share their observations and opinions with a larger audience, an audience that they hope will feel the emotions that the playwright leaves to the actors to convey. So, what I'll be doing in about the next 30 minutes or so, we'll be discussing several plays with social commentary from some very different playwrights. And these playwrights seek to make social change. First, let us consider one of the very earliest plays, Everyman. The playwright of Everyman is lost unto history, but its first known printing was 1530. Remember, during the Middle Ages, most people were illiterate, and the Roman Catholic services they attended were given in Latin, which they did not understand. Everyman was a morality play specifically written to teach proper church morals of the time. People learn by sharing stories. And what better way to learn the story of how to lead a moral, church sanctified life than to hear and see about it through a play? The church service sought expression through drama. A summary of the plot is about how the good and evil deeds of one's life will be tallied by God after death. Every man is the protagonist who represents all mankind. During the action, every man tries to convince other characters to accompany him as he travels his life journey toward inevitable death and his reckoning with God. Other characters include fellowship, kindred, goods, beauty, strength, etc. None will travel with him to death. Only good deeds follow every man beyond the grave to God. Remember, the early church stressed good deeds for its converts. Every man's moral message is clear to the audience. If you do the good deeds as prescribed by the church, then God will reward you in heaven. So now I'll switch this over to Will because he will be playing the last few minutes of Every Man. And this is where every man goes into God and takes good deeds. At least that's what I'm hoping happens here. So let's see. And while he's prepping that, it might take him a second or so. I do hope that several of you maybe were able to see Every Man. That was performed this past summer at on the Shakespeare Playhouse here in Cookeville. Looks like he's getting it. And if not, this clip comes from Portland Community College, Portland, Oregon, and it is taken online. So if you're very interested, I think it's one of the better ones of Every Man, and you can watch the whole play for free.
Nay, every man, I will bide with thee. I will not forsake thee indeed. Thou shalt find me a good friend at need.
Good deeds, now may I true friends see. They have forsaken me, every one. I love them better than my good deeds alone. Knowledge, will ye forsake me as well?
Yea, every man, when ye to death do go, but not yet, for no manner of danger.
Gramercy knowledge, with all my heart.
Nay, I will not from hence depart, till I see where ye shall become.
Methinketh, alas, that I must be gone, to make my reckoning, and my debts pay. For I see my time is nigh spent away. Take example, all ye that this do hear or see, how they that I love best do forsake me. Except for my good deeds, which biteth truly. Have mercy on me, God most mighty.
Fear not. I will speak for thee.
Hear I cry, God, mercy.
Short our end, minish our pain. Let us go and never come again.
Into thy hands, Lord, my soul I commend. Receive it, Lord, that it be not lost.
Okay.
Now hath she suffered.
Okay, thank you. Yes. As we can see how the early church was trying to influence people around. From a centuries old play about every man, let's move to a 20th century play about every woman. It is entitled Machinal. Now that's how I'll be pronouncing it, spelled Machinal. Some playwrights or some authors call it Mackinaw, but I like Machinal. And this is by playwright Sophie Treadwell. And well, Susie Zeller, could tell you about Sophie, but I'm going to let Sophie tell you about herself and some about Machinal. All right, I have sent Will the video of Sophie Treadwell, which he will bring up. And while he is doing this, this is a play that I studied in a class, and I first delivered this Sophie Treadwell speech to class.
Buenos tardes, bona primity, and good afternoon, everybody. I speak to you today. Yes, I wrote Machinal, and I was inspired, you see, inspired, emotionally driven even. Machinal is based upon a real trial in New York that I attended every single day. What they, the system that is, did to that poor accused woman horrified and enraged me. It was 1927. Ruth Snyder was accused of murdering her husband. Murder, I tell you, and in cold blood. Well, her trial was all over the newspapers and magazines, headlines blared, photographs of everything, absolutely everywhere. The lawyers all talked about it, and yellow journalists carried on and on. And those damn sneaky photographers who photographed her as she was being executed. She was supposedly judged by a jury of her peers. Peers. This was 1927. Women could not serve on juries. How were 12 men on that jury her peers? They were not. Yes, it's true that women were working in offices more than in previous decades. They were becoming clerks and typists, but at lower wages than their male counterparts. And they were open to sexual harassment because they were so financially dependent upon men. Henry Ford and other capitalists were increasingly hiring women for assembly line jobs, but again at lower wages than those of men. Prohibition was in full swing, so neither women nor men could legally enjoy the occasional adult beverage. Even what you sent by the United States Postal Service was restricted, as the U.S. Postmaster General could and did censor the mail. My point is this. The time of machinal is 1928, when the government and society at large tightly regulated what people, especially poorer women, could do. Women such as Ruth Snyder and the nameless young woman in Machinal were victims of the capitalist system. Long before Machinal, though, I had already written other articles for Harper's Weekly magazine and the newspapers New York Journal and the New York Herald Tribune. Attacks on women's rights, articles on women's rights, birth control, racial inequality, and such. The newspapers wanted me to cover Snyder's murder trial, but I said no. Instead, I wrote the play, Machinal, which inspired the movie Body Heat. Other plays I penned regarding women in unhappy situations include Ladies Leave and For Saxophone. Plays have greater longevity and emotional impact than anything in print. Yes, I know about emotions, sadness, heartbreak, anger, resentment, and hatred. I learned that as a young girl when Daddy returned to his homeland of Mexico, abandoning Mama and me. Life was difficult in those years in the early 20th century when females were, treated as mere property, chattel. Mama and I persevered, though, and I had to grow up fast with an emotionally and financially dependent mother. Eventually, I graduated from UC Berkeley, where I was quite active in journalism and theater. As a journalist, I traveled the world. I went to France at an early, as the only female journalist to cover the Great War. What you call World War I, it's what I called Little War Theater. And in Mexico, I wrote about the Mexican Revolution and interviewed Pancho Villa. Yes, I was an excellent journalist. I was also an excellent playwright. Machinal is probably the most famous of my plays, and it has been produced many times. The critics loved it, not only when it was originally produced in the late 1920s and early 1930s, but later when it was rediscovered in the late 20th century when feminism came back to the forefront of social consciousness once more. Gaynor of Cornell University writes that I sought in Machinal, quote, a theatrical style that would emphasize my protagonist's sense of entrapment and desperation and represent her psychic distress. Machinal is, therefore, in the genre of expressionism. Expressionism emphasizes intense emotions and the failure of the social systems that have been overlooked. It criticizes, critiques the government, big business, the military, family structures, and sexism. Expressionism delivers thoughts and feelings. It is characterized by episodes, such as Machinal is. Also, rather than names, characters are simply referred to as who or what they are, such as young woman or accountant. Instead of lots of scenery and props, lights and sounds are used extensively. It's all about meaning and emotion. And I assure you, Machinal is full of emotion. The raw, deep, ugly kind of emotion that I felt during Ruth Snyder's murder trial. Let me give you a brief overview of Machinal. Remember, I based Machinal on real, notorious, and highly publicized murder trial. My expressionist drama suggests that the wife's actions are the result of the repressive role forced on women by society. The story is a broad view of the objectification of women in the early part of the 20th century and is still true, in my humble opinion, to some respect. I identify them by their jobs, such as telephone girl, file clerk, and priest. The dialogue is staccato paced and filled with cliches and repetitions, and the plot of the story is episodic, with each episode representing a mode of female repression. Women were repressed in business by having only low-paying jobs, in the home by having to help support families, in marriage by having to submit to the sexual needs of a husband they are compelled to marry for money, for birthing children whom they do not want, and in love affairs.
You've got some Shatner-esque pauses in there, my dear.
All right, you know what? I'll just take it up from there because I've got the words in front of me. So just get rid of her. I don't have my hat here, but I'll continue on with it.
Give me just a second. I'm doing a
Sure.
stop share on it.
There we go. All right. In marriage, by having to submit to sexual needs of a husband they are compelled to marry for money. By birthing children whom they do not want. And love affairs by being able to only dream of happiness, not actually obtain it. In the judicial system by being judged by all male juries and judges. And by religion by having it forced upon them even at death. In this manner, the young woman, Helen Jones, becomes an every woman. Thank you for having me, Sophie Treadwell, speak to your class. I now give you back to Susie. So Susie is back. All righty.
The
Place contains
it
social
froze.
comment.
So he's having to restart it. Sorry.
I have a beautiful picture of her drinking coffee.
You not have.
I'll pull it back up as quick as I can. As long as the service is continuing, let her continue.
Well, we pause.